Warning! Warning! This podcast contains spoilers.
Listen at your own risk.
Welcome to Medium Shift, the podcast that investigates how stories stack up from medium to medium through the adaptation process.
In today's episode, we soar like an eagle with Eddie the Eagle.
That's nice, I like that.
Thanks.
Welcome to Medium Shift. I'm Chris.
And I'm Ev.
So, Eddie the Eagle. This is actually a bit of a milestone for us because this is doing our first based on a true story adaptation, which I am personally very excited about. And also a film that I am surprisingly excited about, but we'll get to that in a moment. So, Eddie the Eagle, sports biopic from 2016, directed by Dexter Fletcher, starring Taron Egg. What do you think of it?
Taron Egg?
Yeah, that's my nickname for him.
Okay.
Yeah, I love Taron Egg. He's great.
He is. I think he's gonna really soar when it comes to acting roles.
Soar like an eagle. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you've already used that one that episode. You can't just keep recycling it.
I wasn't intending to. It was just a
Just happened.
unintentional masterpiece.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, after Rocket Man, I think he's going to get a lot of attention this year for Rocket Man, and then he's just going to take off. Well deserved. He's awesome.
I see him as being one of the next great character actors.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. But yes, in regards to this particular film, I think he did a really good job. He really captured the mannerisms of the original Matthew Edwards.
Matthew Edwards?
Yes, that was his actual name.
I thought it was Michael Edwards.
Oh, Michael might have been. Something begin with him.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, really capturing Michael Edwards.
They say Michael Edwards at one point during the film.
Okay,
Jim
that must be
Broadbent,
it.
the commentator.
I think I'm confusing.
Yeah. They both start with M at the very least,
And
but yeah.
Matthew Vaughn did produce this and kept
is that
seeing
too.
his name around.
Yeah,
so.
he shows up a lot, actually, in the details around this movie, which is interesting, so, yeah.
So yes, I think it was a really good combination. You had Matthew Vaughn, Dexter Fletcher and
Dexter
Taron Egerton.
Fletchling. Like Eagle. I had to get that one out
Dexter
there.
Fletcher.
I
Matthew
thought about it
Vaughn.
while we were following this film, and I'm like, I need to make this joke one point sooner or later. So I just had to get that out of my system. Yes.
So, Dexter Fletcher, Matthew Vaughn, Taron Egerton really work well together.
Yes.
And have for a while now. So, it's always good seeing one of their films.
Yeah,
I
sure.
reckon. And this was nice. It was a nice little sporty, feel-good movie that reminded me a lot of Cool Runnings, which was a big inspiration.
Yeah, funnily enough, I
this.
feel like we're going to be talking about Cool Runnings surprisingly a lot in relation to this movie. So, yeah.
Well, the movie mentioned it, so we may as well.
No, fair enough. And it was the exact same Olympics as well.
Yeah.
So, funnily enough, they're almost like the 1988 Olympic Cinematic Universe or something.
You mean real life?
Yeah, true. Wow, blurring the lines between fiction and reality, which I guess like all movies based on a true story do. But still, I digress. Again, yeah, I really like this movie as well. Like, surprisingly, because it is really schmaltzy and like emotionally dripping, and it hits every single sports biopic cliche imaginable. Like, you know exactly how the script is going to play out if you've seen enough of these films. But I don't really care. Like, it's so earnest and it's so sincere and so charming that it doesn't bother me at all. Like, the best analogy I can think of is like, the movie's kind of like a little puppy that's constantly nipping at your feet, and it's really excited, but it's also really uncoordinated, and it keeps falling over itself, and it's clearly not very bright, but it's so earnest and wholesome and just sincere that you can't help but love it just a little bit. So, yeah. So ultimately, I don't think the writing or the construction of this movie is anything amazing. The subject matter and the sheer earnestness that it used in relation to its source material really makes it something that I feel warm and fuzzy watching, which is really nice. So the first time I saw this film was on a plane, and it's a perfect plane movie, but even watching it at home in anticipation for this episode, I thought it was still really charming. Yeah.
I think part of that is also the fact that we haven't had one of those smudgy movies really for a while now.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, anytime they've done any sporty biopic recently, it's always been hard drama, intense emotional angst, and a lot of this darker subplots going on. Everything's set at night under big floodlights and stuff. And this one was bright. Everything was white because of the snow.
Yep.
And
Everyone's walking around in like white, like brightly colored latex.
Yeah.
It's delightful.
And like a whole bunch of very 80s pastels.
The songs in these movies as well.
I love the soundtrack.
It's just, it's absurd. Like every single time one of these songs started that I recognize, I'm like, of course they're using it at this moment. But it just, I don't know, it really works for me in a way that I wasn't expecting. You make a really great point referencing how these movies are not made before, because especially if we want to talk about the behind the scenes of this film, that's kind of the reason it got made in the first place. That Matthew Vaughn was watching Cool Runnings with his kids, and like, people don't make these movies anymore. That sort of like 90s Disney feel-good sports, like drama comedies.
Plucky underdog.
Yeah, exactly. That at the end of the film, like, you feel invested in like the human spirit and the desire to overcome, and you just want to go out and climb trees and run down mountains and things like that. That's what I felt anyway. But but those movies don't really exist anymore, as you're talking about, which is why this one feels so earnest in so many ways, because it's harkening back to a type of movie that has disappeared in a way that is so, I don't know, so delightful, I think. Yeah. That's really great.
Exactly. It does help that it has a really great cast.
It does.
Predominantly British cast as well, which are always delightful.
Yeah. And British tangential too.
Yes. It's always good seeing Jim Broadbent just in anything.
He's fantastic
really.
in everything,
Yeah.
quite frankly. I was thinking about it watching them. The moment he showed up, I'm like, oh yeah, Jim Broadbent. Like, I don't have any negative connotations attached to him, which is nice. It's probably going to say something racist now the moment I've said that, but still. Leading up to that point, he's delightful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the entire cast has some great workers in there. Keith Allen, he's also another British treasure for me. He played the father.
Don't think I know him in anything else, actually, off the top of my head.
Ooh, you should definitely watch BBC's Robin Hood then.
Oh, okay.
He plays the sheriff of Nottingham in that, and he is campy villain all the way, and it is brilliant.
Is it a miniseries or a TV movie?
TV series.
Okay, cool.
But like a British one, so kind of a miniseries.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, that kind of goes without saying for a lot of British television.
And a lot superior to the unfortunate Taron Egerton Robin Hood.
Ooh, yeah. I still haven't seen that one. That might be an interesting one to do an episode on, actually, from what I've heard
especially with the
about
whole
it.
modern sort of weird...
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting off topic.
Just
now.
rip-offs of Batman Begins and things like that, too. But anyway, once again, we digress.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, Keith Allen, I do find absolutely delightful. And... just there are so many great like small roles. Daniel Ings is quite an interesting fellow. He did play very sort of the not campy, but the incredibly cliche villain jock character. Yeah, which in any other movie would not work. It was very see-through, but I think in this, because it was such a small role and based on true events and. Those things actually sort of happened. I think this is one of the few times the movie actually got it right.
Yeah, that's true.
In terms of the story, you sort of just went with it, and it's like, yeah, he'll get his comeuppance, which he did.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, really quite nice. It's as you're saying, like, he's definitely, almost everyone in this movie is playing an archetype in some way or another. Like, the father is always like the begrudging father who doesn't believe in what the son believes in, and there's also the reluctant drunk coach that used to have a shot at glory, and now this is his chance to reclaim it once again. You've got the plucky upstart and Taron Egg and all that as well. Like, it's very clearly like archetypal in so many respects, which is once again, you know, going back to how much this movie is just a 90s Disney sports movie, except made in modern day. So, so I think, but for the most part, like, all of these, like, everyone in this movie knows what exactly type of movie they're in. Like, Hugh Jackman especially. Oh, like, I swear, like, there's something about the character is written. The fact that he's always, like, begrudgingly and down and walking around with a flask and things like that. Hugh Jackman almost feels like he's having fun with the role, with, like, the archetypal role that he's playing. And he's delightful. I mean, Hugh Jackman is charming and everything.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, even though, like, we'll get into how accurate this movie is, which is hint not at all.
No.
Like, that character doesn't exist in real life or anything like that. But I think he was a decent enough addition, especially to make it fit into that kind of the formula that they were clearly going for. So
Absolutely, yeah. I am disappointed that we had Hugh Jackman and Taron Egerton in a movie and neither of them sung. Like, I'd like to see them work again because they did work well together.
yeah, absolutely. They had great like chemistry together, 100%.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to see them in a musical now.
That's a really good point. Yeah, damn. Maybe the Rocket Man sequel or something. We'll figure something out. But yeah, that I would love to see the two of those together.
Elton John meets Peter Allen?
Yeah. Oh, I was going to go with P.T. Barnum, but sure, that makes more sense. More sense than P.T. Barnum living for another 100 years. Yeah. That's a really good point. I mean, both of them are so talented.
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, love Taron Egg, more ways than one. Yeah, so do we want to move into kind of the true story that this film was based on then? Or?
Yes, the true story, which, as quoted by the real Eddie, this movie is only about 10% based off of.
Yeah. This film takes a lot of liberties, shall we say, with the true story. So there's, I think... So this is going to be an interesting one to talk about because I ultimately do think all of the choices that they made maintain kind of the ethos of what Eddie the Eagle, not only as like a character, but as like a media sensation represents. I think
the sort of myth of Eddie the Eagle rather than
100%. It totally mythologizes something that already existed in real life. Absolutely. So I think in that respect, in the most important respect, it is true to his legacy.
Yeah.
But the actual plot events themselves, not at all accurate. So a lot of it is used to take like creative liberties, like especially as we were talking about how it tries to fit into that really straightforward like sports dramedy formula by having the coach. Funnily enough, in Cool Runnings, the coach in that movie is completely fictional as well.
Yes,
surprisingly.
John Kenny's character.
Yes, yeah, he was also delightful. Yeah, so he's completely made up. Christopher Walken's character is completely made up. The fact that he just decided to go into ski jumping with like no prior experience is completely artificial. Yeah. Like there's still a lot of things.
Him going to Germany, completely artificial.
Yep, absolutely. Where did he practice? Somewhere in the US, didn't he?
Yeah, Lake...
I almost want to say like Lake Placid or something like that.
Yeah, I think there was Lake Placid.
Yeah, but and he trained under a couple of like different people. Like he had a few coaches along the line, but he was mostly solitary for the most part. So one thing I was kind of surprised that they didn't focus on the film, I guess because it would have been maybe gave a little bit too much of a serious edge, was that how much into poverty he actually was.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So
there was the story of him actually having to rent a place at a mental asylum
because it was the cheapest rent he could find, and that was when he found out he got into the Olympics too. So yeah, I'm kind of surprised they shied away from that because it would have like added to the underdog narrative a little bit more. But
it did touch on the spirit of things, him working his way, sleeping in a cupboard in a pub.
That's true. Yeah. Once again, I think it gets the ethos of it right, even if the plot details aren't exactly the same. So
the one thing I'm disappointed that they didn't touch in that sort of plot detail was also the fact that they did bring it up again with him being a skier, but he was an excellent jumper, like, before he actually took on the actual ski jump as an idea. Because he was like a stunt jumper, he was a ski teacher, I think, at one point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, I'm pretty sure he had the record for jumping the longest distance over like objects. I think it was like six school buses at one point, and he held that record. So he was definitely not going in blind. He had worked very hard to get where he was.
Absolutely. I think what I find so fascinating about this film is, and like how it was adapted from the true story, is that it feels like less of an adaptation of the true events and more like an adaptation of the media narrative around the true events, because there was so much talk at the Olympics of like how he had just come out of nowhere and he had no experience and he wasn't even training or anything like that, where in essence he was in the gym like 3 hours a day. He was constantly jumping and training and working really hard. Like the media tried to present this certain narrative that once again reinforced the idea of the underdog story, and the film basically adopted that and then turned it into the myth of Eddie the Eagle, rather than kind of showcasing the fact that, yeah, sure, he was still absolutely the underdog of the Olympics, but he wasn't coming in as just like some random Joe Blow who just decided he wanted to have a go at ski jumping. So,
but yeah, and I think the best part that it adapted was very much the spirit of him just trying. It was one of his quotes. His intent was also to bring back one of the things that he felt was lost in the Olympics and professional sport, and that was the idea that you're doing the sport for fun. And it was about amateurs and their struggle rather than the top percenters always constantly winning.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think
That,
is...
was definitely brought through, especially in, I feel, the scene with the second press conference where he announces he's doing the 90 jump. I thought that there encapsulates the actual true story the most of anything. Because also that press conference did happen.
Yeah.
You can see it. It's on video.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that, especially in tandem with the quote that the movie ends on as well, like saying, what is it exactly? Something along the lines of is like, it's not about winning, it's about competing, essentially. That's kind of the ethos of it. And then that's
And life is not about the triumph, it's about the struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think in the end, it misconstrues a narrative a little bit to kind of reinforce that myth. Because even though, like, the one thing that definitely stands out to me is when Christopher Walken finally meets up with Hugh Jackman's character and then writes in the book, this is where the real training begins. Yeah. And he's like, oh, he's going to be starting here, but he's going to come back, in 4 years' time and he's going to be amazing. Nope. Real life, that was the only Olympics he ever went to.
No.
After that, they literally enacted a law that was colloquially named after him so that he couldn't get into the Olympics again. So it's not a matter of like, oh, he's just going to keep trying harder and he's going to come back as a real competitor. No, he never actually made it.
The world sucks.
Yeah, 100%. So that's why I prefer the movies version, to be honest. Yeah. In my mind, like, it almost felt like it was setting up an Eddie the Eagle 2 that just goes straight into fiction. That follows him coming back and he's like a real competitor and he's taking on the actual jock and he's really fit and like he's shaved the mustache and all that as well, but that's just not what happened.
Yeah.
At all.
Completely understand. So is there anything else part of the true story that we should be bringing up? We should mention, we talked about how the character of Hugh Jackman was entirely fictional. He was inspired by actual coaches that Eddie had.
Like an amalgam of a bunch of people.
Yes, specifically 2 American coaches that helped him early on and sort of brought him into the actual ski jumping as an Olympic sport. They were there. But then they moved on, he moved around, etc. But yes, so there is hints of truth in even the most fictional parts of this movie.
Yeah. As we've kind of been reiterating throughout here, it's like, even though the actual plot details aren't exactly right, like the
spirit is.
The spirit is the same. Yeah, there's something that's probably worth talking about, especially considering this is our first, like, based on a true event film that we've done. Like, there's this theory of narrative that you can kind of call, like, mimesis or mimetic theory or something like that suggests that narrative is, like, the representation of reality. Like, it's supposed to just embody our day-to-day experience into some sort of, structured form. But that isn't inherently the case when it comes to narrative, because narrative in many ways is kind of like a simplifying down of real events. Like, life is complicated and like things don't logically move from one thing to the next with like clear motivations and things like that. So if you think of like our life as being chaotic and complex, narrative as a tool is kind of a simplification of that into something that someone can just view easily and then, clearly understand how this event leads to this event and what this person was feeling at this certain time and things like that. So in many respects, narrative just as a tool or like a form of communication onto itself is all about simplifying down reality into something that is more straightforward and clear, while still in many respects maintaining something like nuggets of real life. Like we can still watch movies and like empathize with characters. Like, say for example, someone loses a job, like that may be related to a series of events that would never happen in real life, but we can still empathize with the fact that he lost his job. That is something that we see in our own reality. So I think it's a really interesting thing based on true event films where they're representing a reality, but in a way that reality isn't. Like, reality is messy. As we're talking with like the underdog story with Eddie the Eagle, like he had so much training beforehand and things like that. There's so many things to his story that doesn't fit the kind of narrative that the media in this movie wants to present. So the version of their narrative is basically condensing down and changing and like simplifying that story into something that maintains the ethos of what they want, even if it isn't actually accurate to reality itself. So
yep, if we watched a film that was entirely true to life and entirely factually accurate as a narrative film, it would suck.
Yeah, it'd be
so bad,
super boring.
And the only way you could probably end it is basically with someone's death, because that's the best that we can do in trying to come up with an ending.
Yeah,
because life continues. Life is chaos, and then you die.
Yeah, That's
That
very
is
true.
the motto of our show now.
Life is chaos and then you die.
Yep.
I can get behind that. There are like art cinema films out there that try and represent reality in those ways with like, gaps and, characters just don't really have any clear motivation and they wander around and things like that. But that is largely antithetical to what people consider like the classic narrative and things like that. So those are outlying situations. But yeah, I just think it's a really interesting kind of idea, especially in relation to true story films, which obviously we're going to be doing more of in the future because I think they make for really interesting adaptations. Is there anything else you want to talk about in relation to Eddie the Eagle?
Nothing that I can think of aside from the fact that, again, this cast is really, really good.
We're harping on about that a little bit, aren't we?
Yeah, it's just the main sort of takeaway I took out of all of this was just how great British actors are, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Taron Egerton is really a star on the rise in so many respects.
Oh, absolutely.
I had a really interesting relationship to his performance in a way, because the first time I saw this film on a plane, I knew nothing about Eddie the Eagle. Like, I never heard of this person before or anything like that. So I'm watching it. I thought Taron Egerton was almost like hamming it up in some way. Like he was.
Oh, no, that is entirely accurate.
I know, that's what really surprised me. Like, I thought he was playing a caricature of the character, like, really hyping it up for the camera. But then I watched some of, like, the true, like, the real life press conference that you're talking about and his jumps and things like that. And the way he looked, I'm like, no, it's actually really spot on.
That was one of the things that the real Eddie actually really liked about them casting Taron Egerton, because they met before, so Taron could get the mannerisms and things down, and he said that was one of the most accurate parts was his performance, because he really understood the mannerisms of Eddie.
Yeah, absolutely, which I think was great. So, I mean, if the real person has the seal, gives him the seal of approval, I think that's pretty damn impressive. So, imitating a real person on film can be an incredibly difficult task in some respects, but yeah, I think he did really well. And not only that, but he, like, committed to the role physically. I think he, like, put on a bit of weight, and obviously he grew the mustache and everything like that. Like, really impressive stuff. So, no, I thought it was really cool.
He even learned to ski jump in a little way.
Yeah, to some respects. I mean, you can tell, like, the way that they shot a lot of the ski jumping, it's never him doing anything like that. Some of the CGI is a little bit messy in some respects.
I was about to bring that up. There was some, especially with Hugh Jackman's ski jump, looking at that, I'm like, oh, looks fanciful. But I like that they were trying to take different approaches to the same just action of a ski jump, showing that again in different angles, different ways they're doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
They try to make it interesting. Some of them didn't quite work, but some of it did.
Yeah.
And I like that they kept things with variety, basically.
Visually interesting in a way. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think a lot of sports movies, like the bad sports movies, just kind of end up falling back on representing like sporting events similar to what we would watch on television. Like I've seen like tennis movies and all that. They don't dramatize it in any way. You just feel like you're watching the live broadcast of an actual tennis match, which I'm not fond of at all in so many respects. I mean, if it's cinematic, like you really should be leaning into all the opportunities that provides you. And I think this movie does for the most part. I don't think there's anything incredibly innovative about it. Side note, if people want to watch a really, really impressive skiing sequence on film, I'd recommend watching the opening of Molly's Game, because it's happening at the same time with this really quick voiceover narration, and there's a lot of like charts and marks coming up on screen. It's really visually impressive. I love that film. Yeah, for the most part, I think this was still really effective. So aside from that, CGI.
Well, there was a quote by Dexter Fletcher. He was basically talking about how you sort of lose about 50% of the height whenever you put anything on screen. And the fact that they spent a lot of their time just trying to work out how do we actually make the ski jump feel like 90 meters rather than, or 70 meters in most of the cases. Because as soon as you do that, everything looks basically within the confines of the screen. And with the foreground and the background, things are losing perspective all the time. So I think just being able to make that ski jump look actually kind of terrifying, I think was a big win on their part.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not like neither of us are accurate, like, and experts when it comes to the art or the sport of ski jumping, but it feels like the movie tried to at least do its due diligence in the way that it represented, like, the real dangers and kind of the insanity of the sport as well. Like, I don't remember if it's in the film or if I read it in an interview outside of the film, but it's like the idea of, like, ski jumping, like, going down a slope and then leaping up into the air is like sheer insanity in so many respects.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, and I think you're right. I think they did a fairly decent job of kind of hammering that home, which once again added to the stakes of the fact that this supposedly Joe Blow guy has just decided, cool, I just want to get into the Olympics and this is how I'm going to do it, by hurtling down a slope and potentially killing myself each time. So, yeah. No, it's very cool.
It is truly terrifying. I've been just 3 meters off the ground on skis, and even that scared the hell out of me.
Oh, wow. On a ski lift? Or on a ski
No,
lift?
no, jumping.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yikes, that's impressive. I've only ever been skiing once in my life, and it was like when I was 10 years old. Pretty sure the fastest I went was like 2 kilometers an hour or something. Then I went inside and watched Harry Potter. It was a quiet day. Yeah, once again, diverging. It's probably worth talking briefly about kind of the production history of the film too. Like, we've touched on it, obviously, regarding that Matthew Vaughn was one of the people who first pushed for it. Like, I think he was the one who purchased the script and things like that. And then he got his friend Dexter Fletcher to direct it. Obviously, he's connected to Taron Egerton as well through the Kingsman films. But the film was actually, I think the film rights were originally sold in 2000 or the early 2000s or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was about 10 or so years after the actual jump itself. So, late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, sure. So, and there was, the film was originally going to go ahead in like the mid 2000s, like 2007-esque, with Steve Coogan playing the main role, which frankly I struggle to imagine, honestly. I feel like it would have been, I feel like the tone would have been very different. It would have been more classic slapstick.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that Eddie himself was worried about. He felt it was just going to be another Alan Partridge story that they were going to turn it into, rather than his story. Which
Sure.
means he was thankful when it didn't end up happening and got moved to another actor with Rupert Grint.
That's right. Who was going to film it after he shot the last 2 Harry Potter films, wasn't he?
Yep.
Yeah, but once again, that fell through. Yeah, I could more see him as Eddie the Eagle more than Steve Coogan anyway.
Definitely.
But once again, it's like one of those things that Taron Egg did such a good job that it's kind of difficult to see anyone else in that role at this point. So I think ultimately all those kind of diversions and all those like failed starts ultimately ended up helping the film, because I really think the way that Matthew Vaughn approached it as saying like, I want to create a 90s sports biopic, except today, really succeeded. And I think it makes the movie really charming, because otherwise it could be totally forgettable.
Fair enough.
Cool. Do we want to move into Do It Differently then? Or...
Sure. Jingle, jingle, jingle.
Jingle. Yeah.
Okay.
We should probably get an actual thing for that one day, maybe. I don't know.
That's effort.
I'm kind of connected to it at this point. It's kind of nice. And we're so in sync now too.
Yep.
Yeah, we just look at each other and all that. It's great. Yeah. Do you want to go first this week then?
Sure, I'll go. My Do It Differently is kind of what you mentioned, in the fact that it's going to be Eddie the Eagle Part 2.
Oh, God. You're pitching a sequel?
I am.
We're doing a
but
sequel?
It's a spiritual sequel.
Oh, okay.
It is basically, I want them to tell the story of Steve Bradbury,
Oh.
the famous ice skater.
Yes! That's such a good idea! Damn it, I really wish I thought of that. Can I just piggyback on your idea?
Sure, let's work through this together.
Okay, sure. Cool. So, do we want to explain who Steve Bradbury is?
Yes. For those who don't know, Steve Bradbury was one of the few Australians to medal in Winter Olympics.
Yes.
Especially in terms of speed skating. I think he was the first speed skater to medal for Australia.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. And the story that has become sort of mythologized behind it is the fact that he, in the heats before, in the semi-finals before the thing, he just scraped in after one of the other races was disqualified. So he was barely meant to be in the finals as it is.
Yes.
And he was pretty far behind everyone else in terms of that particular race, his speed. And he looked like he was just going to come, sixth, seventh, somewhere around there, until a major accident caused the entire first 4 people to take themselves out of the race and allowed Steve Bradbury to skate straight past them into first place.
Oh, it's such...
Where he won the gold.
For people who are not familiar with the story, just Google Stephen Bradbury and watch the footage on YouTube, because it is quite literally like a miracle of sport, and that everyone like falls to pieces in the last corner of the last lap, and he just cruises on by to get first place. It's just, it's just delightful. That's such a great connection with Eddie the Eagle as well, because it's so similar in so many respects.
And the thought that sort of brought me to that was a quote that Steve Bradbury himself made when he was talking about his win at gold. And it's like, someone was saying, do you feel you deserve it? And it's like, I'm not accepting this gold for that final race. I'm expecting it for all the work that went into the years before. And I think that's why it sort of rang true, because he also trained as hard. He was one of our best skaters. He just happened to not be as great at the speed skate as some of the Europeans.
Well, sure.
that were in there. 'Cause
It's a similar thing to Eddie the Eagle, and that he's kind of coming from this country that has no sort of history in winter sports or anything like. I mean, Australia is even more drastically dry compared to the UK. So, yeah.
And he went there and he turned things around just by being steady and a rock and not giving up, basically. And being one of the few to survive the massacre on the ice.
I know, it's delightful. I've even heard it referred to as like the Bradbury principle of it's not over till it's over. So, I mean, the fact that you even have a term like that named after you. How has no one made a movie about Steve Bradbury yet? It's only just occurred to me. That's a really perfect idea, especially if you're going to do something in a similar vein to Eddie the Eagle, of that being really classic, inspiring sports biopic. That's such a great idea. Would you do it with like the same director then, or?
I feel there definitely need to be some links. I think David Fletcher would be great. But I also feel you need that Australianness to it.
Yeah, sure.
So either you get David Fletcher to direct based on scripts
Dexter
by...
Fletcher.
Dexter Fletcher, sorry.
Yep.
Wrong DF
Yeah, close enough.
director. Do this all the time. Yeah, but either you keep Dexter Fletcher on with a script written by Australians who knew the story and know the mythology behind that.
Sure.
Or you go for a more Australian approach with an Australian director and just have sort of the Matthew Vaughn production company sort of behind it to feed off that sort of influence.
Yeah, I can see that.
And you know what? You can probably have Hugh Jackman in it as well.
I was about to say, would you want to cast someone like Hugh Jackman as Steve Bradbury?
Maybe not as Steve Bradbury,
Yeah.
but you need
as once again another fictionalized coach.
Maybe. I don't know enough about
Sure.
the history of Steve Bradbury in order to make this right here, right now.
Yeah, fair.
But I feel you do need that top Australian star. And Hugh Jackman is basically the film equivalent of these underdog stories. He's the boy from Oz that made it in Hollywood.
100%, and he is delightful.
Yes.
Yep, no, fair enough. I think that's a really great idea. So I guess that's not even like a do it differently, but just do another one.
Yeah.
Yep, which, hey, still pretty appropriate. I mean, look, to be honest, I found with Eddie the Eagle, it's another one of those films that we've talked about prior, like Captain America: The First Avenger and films like that, where there's not a massive amount I would change. Not necessarily because I think it's amazing or anything like that, but just because it's so clear in what it is, and it just succeeds with doing with that. So I really kind of struggled what exactly I would shift. I mean, the only thing I could really think about is maybe have a script that isn't necessarily more accurate to real life. Like, you can maintain a lot of the similar beats and things like that, but potentially steer it into something that's a little less schmaltzy early in the film.
Oh, yeah.
I think you can still maintain that sort of cheer-worthy ending and things like that, especially at the Olympics and such. But the movie is so hammering you over the head with how earnest and like how much you should be feeling for this person and following this person and things like that. So maybe tone it down a little bit to make it feel less emotionally manipulative. But beyond that, I couldn't really see anything that I would drastically change without just completely changing the approach to the source material. And I don't think I particularly want to. I think the direction that they chose is just perfect for Eddie the Eagle stories. Yep. So, yeah.
I totally understand. I totally get that.
Yeah, awesome. Cool.
Okay, cool.
All right.
So I'll do it differently. Don't do it differently.
Don't do it differently, or just do it another way. Just do something else. Do something else unrelated. Yep, it's fine. Yep, it's weird. It's not a movie. I mean, I don't think Eddie the Eagle is amazing or anything, but it's just I don't know. It's something about this movie that I feel like I'm
hits
just
the right emotional pressure points for an audience that you're just like, yeah, I'm happy now.
Yeah, for sure. This feels like a movie I could recommend to anyone and be pretty comfortable that they would enjoy. Like, it's just a genuine, sweet crowd pleaser. I mean, it didn't do incredibly well critically when it first came out, and I can kind of see why by how schmaltzy it is, but I just don't feel that way. So have you got anything to recommend for us this week? This episode?
Yeah, on a completely unrelated and totally different note, for my recommendation, I'm going with a podcast.
Ooh, very exciting.
Yes. Now, again, given when this is recorded and when this will be released. Who knows? Maybe things have changed. But at the moment, I'm really into quick questions with Soren and Dan.
Oh, never heard of it.
It is very recent. As of recording, they've only done 3 episodes.
Oh, okay.
And it's basically just 2 writers, at the moment television writers, but former internet writers, just basically trying to catch up as friends, usually over Skype.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah,
So
they just ask each other questions on random things.
So it's just a kind of a conversationalist thing or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's nice to sort of sit back. So for those who know of the prime heyday of Cracked.com, the 2 writers are Soren and Daniel O'Brien.
Okay. I think I vaguely recognize those names. Were they in After Hours? Daniel
Yes.
O'Brien? Yeah, okay. Sure.
Daniel Soren. So yeah, and it's them still trying to remain friends, as Daniel O'Brien has gone on to become a writer of Last Week Tonight.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
Soren
pretty
is
impressive.
on American Dad. So it's them just...
Well, they've clearly landed on their feet after Crack dissolved. That's
Yeah.
impressive. Yeah, good on them.
It's just nice. It's something you can sort of listen back to. You don't have to think too hard. It's just random stories, random things that pop into their head. Yeah, nothing super grand, but just something you can sort of sit back and not think about.
Cool. No, fair enough. I know you've always been a big fan of Cracked and a lot of their work and things like that. So it's kind of nice that there is something to continue onwards after. What exactly happened with Cracked again? Did they just start laying off staff? Or...
Yeah, they gave up on their video production side of things.
Oh,
and
that's right.
Everything just went to hell.
Yep. They're still releasing articles and things like that, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, similar to you, I'm probably going to recommend something that is not at all related, but is actually an interesting film I saw recently on Netflix. It's kind of weird recommending Netflix movies sometimes, because I feel when the platform started, there's almost like a level of prestige to what a Netflix original was, particularly their TV shows like House of Cards and Orange is the New Black and so far. But they've put their name on so much stuff now that it's just been distilled to nothingness.
Even stuff that isn't a Netflix original.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's Australian produced shows that to the rest of the world, oh, it's just a Netflix original. It must be Netflix made it. It's like, nope, that's not. That's a little bit culturally imperialistic, but that's a whole other conversation. Yeah, so I'm going to recommend a sci-fi, funnily enough, Australian film, which Netflix bought, called I Am Mother. That recently came on the platform. Have you heard of this film?
I have heard of this one.
So it's a sci-fi thriller / horror film to some respect in a post-apocalyptic future when this robot who is designed to basically rebuild humanity from the ground up after an apocalyptic event by growing up a child in this secure facility, teaching them everything they need to know, and then eventually restarting human civilization since then. So it basically follows the first girl who was born. She's about 15 or 16 at this point, and her, growing up in this facility with this AI robot that's looking after her, and how everything is upended by someone played by Hilary Swank. A character played by Hilary Swank shows up at the front door and basically reveals, oh, the rest of the world is not clearly what you seem. And I don't really want to reveal the rest of the plot because there's a lot of interesting things going on and things like that, and it has a lot of really interesting perspectives on like ideas of like helicopter parenting and like raising children and things like that. But it's just a really, really great sci-fi premise that's presented in a really tight, interesting and exciting way. One of the things I love about this movie is how visually driven it is. Like there's almost no artificial or contrived exposition. Like everything is really clear. Everything is kind of done through like subtleties and movements and things like that. And I think it's not only really great storytelling wise, but I think it has a lot of really interesting and really fun ideas. So yeah, well worth seeing. Yep, and I always appreciate like an Australian science fiction film. So we've had a lot of decent ones in the recent years, actually.
Yeah.
Surprisingly so. So like Upgrade is quite good as well if people haven't seen that.
I love Upgrade.
Yeah, Predestination is really good too. Yep, so interesting. I mean, if we get
Even
renowned...
going all the way back to Daybreakers is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
In fact, basically, if it's an Australian film with Ethan Hawke in it, it's probably going to be good.
Yeah, fair. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a connotation between Australia and sci-fi movies, or if we just, for some reason, it appeals to us over here, but...
Well, we are basically a hellscape.
Well-
We've just changed from everything in the desert is scary to everything in the future is scary.
Yeah, sure. I can see that. So, yeah.
Or both in the case of Mad Max.
True. But no, I think it's a really good film and well worth checking out. So, yeah, one of the rare, decent not necessarily Netflix originals, but, is on Netflix at the moment. So, thank you to everyone who listened to this episode of Medium Shift and our first dive into based on a true story adaptations, which I am very excited about. I'm sure there's going to be plenty more of those coming in the future. Next episode is not based on a true story, unfortunately, as we return to a franchise that we may have done before, but this time we do it in a more, shall we say, engaging format.
It's Batman!
Yes.
Batman, the Telltale series.
Batman, the Telltale series, Season 1, properly followed by Season 2. So I'm very excited about this. I love Telltale games. It's also the first interactive narrative we're doing, which I've done a little bit of academic work on, which is great. So
prepare for information overload.
Information dumping. Yep, it's my whole thesis from last year. I'm just going to blurt into the mic. So until next time, fare thee well.
Oh! That's eagle for bye.